I'm Claire. I'm 34 years old. And 2 months ago, at my father's company gala celebrating the biggest acquisition of his career, he introduced me to a room of 300 people, smiled, and called me the family's greatest disappointment. He said it like it was funny, like it was nothing, like I was nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out the way he expected me to. I smiled, set my wine glass down on the nearest table, walked straight to the microphone he'd just stepped away from, and said 5 words into it. Enjoy tonight, goodbye, forever. Then I walked out of that ballroom without looking back. 300 people watched me go. My father stood frozen on the stage, his celebration draining out of him in real time. What happened after that is why I'm here. And I promise you, if you stay until the end, you will understand exactly why I am not the person he thought he raised. The Hargrove family of Greenwich, Connecticut. That's how we were known. Old money, architectural pedigree, the kind of name that opened doors before you even knocked. My father, Gerald Hargrove, was the founder and managing partner of Hargrove Associates, one of the most respected commercial architecture firms in the Northeast. We had a 4-story brownstone on Maple Hill, a summer house in Newport, memberships at clubs I'd long forgotten the names of. From the outside, we were polished, successful, and intact. My mother died when I was 9, an aneurysm sudden and silent. She was there one morning and simply gone by afternoon. I remember her laugh more than her face. I remember the way she smelled like cedar and something floral I've never been able to identify. I remember her telling me, the week before she died, that I was going to do something extraordinary someday. I held on to that for the next 25 years. My father remarried 18 months later. Her name was Diane, and she came with a son from her first marriage. Nicholas, 4 years older than me, polished and self-assured and accustomed to being the most important person in any room, he entered within a year. Diane wasn't a stepmother. She was the real mother. Nicholas wasn't a stepbrother. He was the heir. I became an afterthought. Not cruelly, not loudly. It was quieter than that, which in some ways made it harder to name. Nicholas got the dinner table conversations about the firm, the architecture, the projects, the future. I got asked if I'd finished my homework. Nicholas got the internship at Hargrove Associates at 17, shadowing my father on site visits, sitting in on client meetings. I got told that architecture was not a very feminine career path. Nicholas was the future of the firm. I was also present at dinner. But my grandfather, Elliot Hargrove, my father's father, he saw me. He would call on Sunday evenings, every week without fail, and ask what I was reading, what I was designing, what I was thinking about. He kept my sketches in a folder in his study, the ones I'd hand him on visits, the buildings I drew from imagination. He'd spread them out and ask me questions about them. Why did I choose this proportion? What was the structural logic here? He treated my ideas as though they were worth examining. He would say things like, "Your mind works differently from your father's, Claire. That's not a weakness. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The day they took my future from me, I was 21 years old, junior year at Cornell's architecture program. I had a 3.9 GPA, a design thesis my professor had described in her written evaluation as quietly visionary in its approach to structural storytelling. I had a summer fellowship application on my desk for a studio program in Copenhagen that would have changed the entire trajectory of my career. I had plans and momentum and the particular confidence that comes from being genuinely good at something you love. My father called me home on a Thursday. "Come this weekend," he said. "We need to talk as a family." Those 6 words had never, in my experience, meant anything I was going to be glad about. I found him in his study. The room smelled like old books and imported leather and the faint trace of his particular brand of pipe tobacco, even though he'd given it up years before. Diane sat beside him in the chair she'd claimed as hers, poised, hands folded, already decided, already a united front. "Claire," my father began, his eyes on the window rather than on me. "The firm is going through a significant restructuring period. Some hard choices need to be made. Nicholas has an opportunity to complete his master's at Columbia, a design management program that's going to position him to take over the firm in a few years. The timing matters. The tuition is significant. He finally looked at me. We need you to take a leave of absence from Cornell, 1 semester, maybe 2, just until things stabilize financially. Diane leaned forward slightly, her voice honey-warm, practiced. A girl as bright as you doesn't need a degree to make a wonderful life for herself, Claire. You'll find your path. You always land on your feet. I sat there completely still, the stillness that comes not from calm but from the body deciding that any movement might break something that can't be repaired. You said you'd always support my education, I said. You made that promise. You stood at Mom's grave and you said you would take care of us. Both of us. My father's jaw tightened. Circumstances change, Claire. I'll make it right when the finances stabilize. This is temporary. He never made it right. And it was not temporary. And the finances, as I would learn years later, were never the reason. What I found out through a conversation with an old family accountant, a man who had known my grandfather and whose conscience had apparently been bothering him for a decade, was that there had never been a financial crisis severe enough to require this choice. There was money. There had always been money. They simply chose not to spend it on me. I didn't argue that afternoon. I sat in that leather-smelling study, in the chair that had always felt slightly too large for me, and I nodded. And I made myself a promise I have not broken since. This was the last time I would allow anyone else to draw the borders of my life. I moved to Chicago with $1,800 in savings, 2 suitcases full of clothes that no longer fit the life I was leaving behind, and a sketchbook stuffed with designs nobody had ever asked to see. My first apartment was a 300-square-foot room above a print shop on a corner in Pilsen. The floorboards creaked in a pattern I eventually memorized. The windows didn't fully seal, and in January the gap let in cold air in a thin, steady stream that I learned to just accept. I slept under 2 duvets. The radiator knocked and hissed all night like it was arguing with itself. The walls were thin enough that I knew my neighbor's TV schedule by heart without ever meeting them. I ate eggs and rice and whatever the corner store had marked down near closing time. I worked mornings at an architectural salvage warehouse in the West Loop, cataloging reclaimed materials, recording provenance, answering the phone. It wasn't glamorous. It was educational in ways Cornell hadn't been yet. You learn about buildings differently when you're handling what they're made of. Old-growth timber, cast iron hardware from demolished factories, terracotta from buildings that no longer exist. Every piece was the remnant of a decision someone made 100 years ago, a structural choice that had outlasted everyone who argued about it. The owner of the salvage house was a woman named Vera Castillo, 60 years old, silver-haired with the particular directness of someone who has spent 4 decades not having time for performance. She noticed me reading zoning code manuals on my lunch break about 3 weeks into the job. She stood in the doorway of the break room and watched me for a moment. "You're not here to sort wood panels," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said, "but I needed the work." She nodded once. "Come talk to me when you're done." She walked back to her office. That week, she gave me the spare desk in the back. Told the city planners and real estate developers who came through looking for materials to talk to me about what they could do with the buildings they were working on, told me to bring my sketchbook. I spent evenings and weekends doing free online courses, building systems, materials science, urban planning, historic preservation standards, structural engineering fundamentals. I taught myself CAD from YouTube tutorials and library books, and the particular education of just doing things and making mistakes and doing them again. I drafted designs on a secondhand laptop that overheated if you ran 2 programs simultaneously, so I learned to work with 1 window at a time. Patience, it turned out, was a skill with applications beyond the obvious ones. I didn't call home, didn't ask for help, didn't tell anyone in Greenwich what I was building. When my father's personal assistant sent a Christmas card with a check for $100 signed from the family, I sent it back inside a blank envelope, unopened, return address only. 4 years after I left Greenwich, I formed a company, Harbor Light Studio LLC. Just me, a drafting table, a rented desk in a shared space in Wicker Park, and more determination than I had any right to feel given the circumstances. I kept my name entirely off every public record. No headshot on the website, no LinkedIn profile, no mentions in the press. All client work ran through the studio name, all contracts were signed by my attorney, or later by my managing partner. No one who didn't need to know the ownership structure knew it. I built Harborlight in silence because silence was the only thing that had ever felt safe. Because I knew that if my family found out I was succeeding, they would find a way to take something, the credit, the narrative, some portion of the story that would make what I'd done about them, rather than about me. Some things you protect while they're still forming. I had learned that the hard way. My grandfather Elliot died 3 years ago when I was 31. I flew back to Connecticut for the funeral, sat in the back pew of St. Andrew's Episcopal, wearing a dark coat, and watched my father deliver a eulogy about a great man who loved his family fiercely and built something lasting. The irony sat in my chest like a stone. At the reception, I stood near the edge of the room with a cup of tea. I didn't drink and watched people who hadn't thought about me in years come and go. Nobody came to talk to me. I was comfortable with that. I was used to the particular invisibility of being the person in the room nobody looks for. 4 days after the funeral, my phone rang. A private number out of New Haven. "Miss Hargrove," said a voice I'd never heard. "My name is Thomas Wren. I'm an estate attorney. I represent your grandfather's private estate, established separately from the family trust your father is aware of." I sat down. "Elliot established a private trust in your name 7 years ago," Thomas continued. "The trust holds $1.1 million. He was specific in his instructions that no family member be informed of its existence until after his death." A pause. "He also left a letter. He asked if he could read it to me. I said yes." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "My dearest Claire," Thomas read, "I know what happened with Cornell. I know about the money your mother left for you, and I know what was done with it. I tried, for years, to reason with your father about what was taken from you. He is not a man who hears what he doesn't want to hear. This money is yours. No conditions, no strings attached to anyone else's vision of who you should be or what you should do with your life. Build something with it. Build something that lasts. You have a gift, the kind that is not loud but that goes deep. And gifts like yours are not meant to be buried under other people's ambitions or used to decorate someone else's legacy. When the day comes, and I believe it will, when they finally understand what they dismissed, it will be too late for them to take credit. I have always believed in you. Every Sunday, every sketch you gave me, every conversation, every single one. All my love, Grandpa Elliot." Let me tell you what Harborlight Studio is today. 22 employees, offices in the West Loop with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The kind of space that says before anyone opens their mouth, that serious work happens here. 8.3 million in annual billings. We specialize in adaptive reuse, historic commercial buildings transformed into mixed-use residential and retail spaces. The work is painstaking, technically demanding, and deeply satisfying. We've won regional design awards 3 years running. We are, quietly, one of the firms in our space with a reputation that precedes every introduction. 3 years ago, a referral came through an architectural consultant who had worked with one of our previous clients, a mid-size commercial real estate firm based in Greenwich, Connecticut, looking to reposition and redesign 4 legacy properties they'd held in their portfolio for years. The buildings were historically significant, chronically underperforming, and stuck in a limbo between their past use and any viable future one. They needed a firm with deep expertise in adaptive reuse and the patience for the particular complications of historic designation review. The client was Hargrove Associates, my father's firm. They signed a 3-year engagement with Harborlight Studio. Full design strategy, historic review management, regulatory compliance, permitting, and architectural direction on all 4 properties. Our work contributed to an estimated 60% increase in asset valuation across the portfolio. My father had publicly credited the repositioning at 2 industry conferences, once calling Harborlight's approach the most sophisticated adaptive reuse strategy I've seen in 20 years of practice. He was praising his daughter's work, the daughter he had told to go find a husband instead of finishing her degree. Every email between the firms went through my project director, Simone Park. Every contract was signed by my managing partner, Adrian Solis. Gerald Hargrove had never, not once in 3 years, met the owner of Harbor Light Studio. He had no idea the name was his own. 2 months ago, the invitation arrived, heavy cream cardstock, engraved lettering in navy. Gerald Hargrove and Hargrove Associates cordially invite you to celebrate the acquisition of the Meridian Realty portfolio, their largest expansion in firm history. Black tie, Manhattan. I held it in my hands for a long moment. I almost recycled it. Part of me had become very good, over 11 years, at simply not engaging, at choosing peace over confrontation, at deciding the distance was worth more than any satisfaction proximity might offer. But then I thought about Grandpa Elliot and his Sunday phone calls and the folder of my sketches he kept in his study. I thought about Cornell in Copenhagen and the fellowship application sitting on a desk in a room I was never allowed to go back to. I thought about $300 for 1 semester of engineering textbooks that my father had declined to cover, and I thought, he is going to do something tonight. He always does. There will be a microphone and an audience and some version of the same joke he has been making my whole life. When that happens, I want to be there, not to cause a scene, just to be the one who decides what happens next. For once, I RSVP'd yes. The venue was a glass-walled event space on the 42nd floor of a tower in Midtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling Hudson River views, white orchids in tall columns every 12 feet. The kind of room where the air itself seems expensive, waitstaff in black moving through it like they'd choreographed it. Which they had. I wore a navy Armani dress, clean-lined and understated. My grandfather's watch, which I'd had restored and fitted to my wrist 2 years ago, a structured bag I'd bought myself the year Harbor Light crossed $5 million in billings. Everything I owned, I had bought myself. From the first paycheck from Vera's salvage house forward, that still matters to me more than any label. Diane found me at the entrance. She'd aged gracefully and expensively, which I supposed was available to her. Her smile found me before her eyes did, and performed warmth for a half second before her gaze did the quick inventory of my outfit, my posture, the particular way I was holding myself that was different. She would sense, from how I used to stand in rooms like this one. Different, though she couldn't have named exactly how. Claire, I didn't know if you'd come. The warmth in her voice was beautifully constructed, weight-bearing nothing. I didn't want to miss it, I said, and I meant it, though not the way she understood it. Inside, 300 guests filled the space. Developers, investors, architects, city commissioners, civic figures. Faces I'd seen in industry publications for years. People who would recognize Harbor Light Studio's name, but not the face behind it, because I had been careful, for years, to keep those two things separate. Nicholas moved through the room like he owned it, which in his mind he always had. He clapped shoulders, laughed at his own jokes, gestured with his champagne glass in a way that suggested he was comfortable being watched. He spotted me from across the room and made his way over with the particular energy of someone who has decided in advance that this interaction will be brief. "Claire, you look good." His eyes did the assessment, landed nowhere specific. "Still up in Chicago doing the consulting thing?" "Architecture," I said. "And development work, right?" He nodded with the enthusiasm of someone filing information they don't intend to retrieve. "Dad mentioned you've been busy." "Freelance, right? That whole market's tough." "Good for you, though, staying at it." I said nothing. He moved on. He had no idea what he'd just walked away from. My seat was table 11. Near the corridor that led to the service kitchen, not the family table, not even close. I'd checked the seating map when I arrived, the way you do when you've spent enough time at events like this to know that where they put you is always a message. I noted it. I said nothing. A waiter appeared with champagne. Krug, nothing less for a Gerald Hargrove event. I took a glass across the room. My father caught my eye at a distance. He lifted his glass slightly in my direction, the gesture you make towards someone you're mildly obligated to acknowledge. Then he turned back to the people who mattered to him. From table 11, I watched and listened. Glass rooms at height carry sound strangely. My father was holding court at a cluster near the bar, 3 tables over and 15 feet up, and I could catch most of it. The Harbor Light engagement was the turning point. He was saying to a developer I recognized from a profile piece. That adaptive reuse strategy on the historic properties, nobody else saw what those buildings could be. Whoever runs that firm has a genuine vision. The developer nodded. I've been trying to get a meeting with them for 6 months. Extremely private operation. Do you know the principals? My father shook his head. Everything goes through intermediaries. Never met them personally. Frankly, I don't need to. The work is the proof. I looked at my champagne and said nothing. My phone lit up. A message from Simone, my project director. Hargrove Associates sent the engagement renewal request this afternoon. 4 new properties, expanded scope, significant increase in contract value. They'd like a response within the week. I typed back, I'll have a decision by Friday. What my father didn't know as he moved through that room accepting congratulations for the acquisition he was celebrating was that the work underpinning his biggest career moment was a decision I was making right now, at table 11, by the service corridor, at the event where he'd seated his daughter, as an afterthought. Before the formal program began, I stepped out to a narrow terrace off the main space. The September air was cool this high up, and you could see the river in both directions, lit and moving. I stood there for a moment just breathing. Nicholas appeared behind me. He leaned on the railing, closer than necessary, the posture of someone who grew up in rooms where he was always the most important person present. "How are you actually doing?" he asked. His tone suggested he already had a prepared response to whatever I said. "Well," I said. "You honestly overwhelmed." He laughed, short and self-aware enough to seem genuine. "Taking over the firm is a lot. Dad makes it look easier than it is." He paused. "You should have stayed, finished Cornell, come into the firm. Things would have been different. You had real talent. Everyone said so." Everyone said so. Past tense. As though I was a former talent, a thing that had been and passed. "I know what I would have done if I'd stayed," he said, his tone shifting into something he probably believed was paternal. "But you made your choices, and you survived. That matters. If things ever get difficult up in Chicago, if the freelance market dries up, or the projects slow down, I could probably find something for you at Hargrove. Something junior, but stable. It wouldn't be creative work, but it'd be steady." I let that sit in the air for a moment, Nicholas. I said finally, "I promise you something is going to change tonight. But it's not what you're thinking." He laughed, a short, uncomfortable sound. Still cryptic, he pushed off the railing. "Speeches are starting soon. You coming in right behind you?" I said. "Some truths need a bigger stage." I followed him inside. The lights came down, a spotlight found the front of the room. My father climbed to the small raised platform to warm and genuine applause. Gerald Hargrove, 63, silver-haired and composed. The kind of man rooms have always arranged themselves around. 40 years, he began, and the room settled. His voice was practiced and resonant and warm in the way of someone who had given speeches in rooms like this one for 4 decades. 40 years of this firm. 40 years of building things that last. He thanked partners, investors, the team that had built the firm with him. He paused to collect himself when he thanked the employees who had been with him from the beginning. A practiced pause that communicated genuine emotion and would not go on long enough to become uncomfortable. He thanked Diane. He thanked Nicholas, who rose from his seat to applause, gesturing at the room with the particular graciousness of someone who has always expected rooms to applaud for him. And then my father's eyes found me, and something moved through his expression that I recognized. The thing he only let out when he thought it would be received as humor. The thing he'd worn at every family dinner where I was the subject and the audience was large enough. And my daughter Claire, the spotlight swung to table 11. 300 people looked at me. "Claire is living proof," he said, "that not every family investment pays off." The first chuckle came from somewhere near the bar, tentative, waiting for permission. My father smiled, and the room took that as permission. No degree, no career to speak of. But she came tonight, and I suppose that counts for something. More laughter. Comfortable. Now. The laughter of people who are in the room where it happens and want to stay in it. Maybe she'll meet someone useful here and finally point herself in a direction. More laughter. Genuine. Easy. The sound of 300 people who would forget they laughed within the hour. I sat completely still. I did not flinch. I did not look away from him. I did not allow my expression to change by any visible degree. I let the laughter happen around me the way you let rain happen. Present, registered, not personal. I waited for it to die. Then I stood. The standing draws attention in a specific way when it happens at the wrong table during a speech. A slow, deliberate rise from a woman in a navy dress at the table near the service corridor. Curious attention, then uncertain attention, then complete attention, as I reached over and picked up the handheld microphone that had been resting at the table for an MC who hadn't needed it yet. My father's smile became something smaller, something that recognized it had made a mistake. The room went quiet. Congratulations, Dad. My voice was steady and clear and reached every corner. 40 years of building things. That is a genuine achievement. I let it sit. You have taught me a great deal about what it takes to make something last, about vision and sacrifice and the cost of being truly committed to a craft. I paused. I want you to know that what I've learned, I have used. I set the microphone down on the table. Enjoy tonight. Goodbye, forever. I picked up my bag. I walked toward the elevator steadily, without hurrying, my heels on the marble floor. Every eye in that room on me. No one spoke for what felt like a long time, a silence that expanded and filled the space the way silence does when everyone present understands that something real just happened, and none of them are quite sure what. I pressed the elevator call button. The doors opened. I stepped inside. They closed. I drove myself to a hotel 6 blocks away, sat on the edge of the bed, and for a long time just breathed. If you're watching this, you probably know something about being the one who doesn't fit the frame your family built. Maybe it wasn't a gala. Maybe it was a holiday dinner, or a graduation, or a phone call that went the way they always go. Maybe it was 1,000 small moments that nobody would formally call cruelty, but that added up to a way of being seen, or not being seen. That shaped everything. I know that feeling. I lived inside it for years. And I know how isolating it is to carry it, because nobody outside your family believes the furniture anecdote or understands how invisible a person can be made in a room full of people who are being perfectly civil. If this story is touching something, I want you to know that this channel exists because of people like you. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever been the one they pointed to in a room for a laugh. I read everything. And please subscribe if you want to hear what happened next, because what my father discovered in the weeks after that gala changed everything he thought he knew about who I was and what he had been standing on. Back to the story. The morning after the gala, I woke up in my Chicago apartment feeling the particular lightness of someone who has stopped carrying something that wasn't theirs to carry. I also knew it wasn't finished. Families like mine don't let exits be clean. They rewrite them. My father would already be shaping this story. Poor Claire. Unstable. Ungrateful. Some kind of episode. Gerald Hargrove, the patient father, doing his best with a difficult daughter. I was right. The text started that evening. Not from my father. He had too much discipline for direct contact. But from Diane's cousin, from family friends I hadn't thought about in 8 years. From a couple of distant relatives I'd barely met. Claire heard about the gala. Your father is really shaken. Are you doing okay? Diane says, you've been under a lot of pressure. We're all a little worried about you. Your dad loves you. He just has trouble showing it. Maybe just reach out, for peace. The architecture was familiar. Poor Claire, struggling, acting out, having some kind of episode. Gerald, the wounded patriarch, extending grace. I didn't respond to any of them. Then came a different kind of call. Tuesday afternoon. A New York number I didn't recognize. Ms. Hargrove, Robert Fenn, senior partner at Hargrove Associates. His voice was careful, professional. I'm reaching out on Gerald's behalf. He'd like to move things toward resolution. Put the personal matters behind you both. That's considerate. He's also had some questions come up internally. Due diligence around one of the firm's consulting relationships. Some questions about Harbor Light Studio. It may be nothing. I kept my voice entirely even. What kind of questions? Someone on the team thought they may have crossed paths with the firm principal at one of our properties. Gerald wanted to loop in legal, just to make sure there were no undisclosed relationships. They were close. Much closer than I'd realized. I'm not aware of what you're referring to, I said. Please let my father know I have nothing to discuss with him. I ended the call before she could respond, and I called Thomas Wren. What was happening inside Hargrove Associates that week? I learned later, in detail. My father had walked into what should have been a routine Monday meeting. His chief of staff placed a folder on the table before he had settled into his chair. We have a situation with Harbor Light Studio, she said. The engagement is up for renewal. We've sent 3 inquiries over the past 6 weeks. The response from their legal team is consistently the same. Under review. We cannot make contact with the principals directly. My father frowned. We've been working with them for 3 years. Someone must have met with them. No one in this firm has ever had a face-to-face with the ownership. Every meeting has been virtual, with project managers. All contracts were executed through their legal team. A silence. If they don't renew, his chief of staff continued, we lose the only firm with the expertise and existing certification relationships to manage the historic designation process on the new portfolio. Properties, the Meridian acquisition economics assume a continuation of that work. Without it, we're looking at 12 to 18 months to find and onboard a replacement, at minimum. I know what it means, my father said quietly. He stared at the folder. Find out who owns that firm, he said. I don't care what it takes. I want a name by end of week. He didn't have to wait that long. Thursday evening, my phone rang, Diane. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered, because there is a version of knowing that is only completed by hearing it directly. Claire, sweetheart. Honey over steel. The voice she had used when I was 15 and she needed me to do something without understanding. It was her idea. I've been so worried. Your father and I both have. Have you? Of course. Your family. Whatever happened at the gala, that's something we can work through. Your father feels terrible. He said I had no career and no degree in front of 300 people, I said, specifically so they would laugh, which they did. He was nervous. He makes jokes when he's nervous. You've known that your whole life. He's known for 40 years how to speak in front of rooms. He wasn't nervous. Diane paused, recalibrating. We'd love for you to come home this weekend. Just dinner. Just the 4 of us. Clear the air. Does he want to apologize? Another pause, fractionally too long. He wants to move forward together. That's what matters most. So no, Claire, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're extending a hand here. You're trying to find out what I know, I said, and how much trouble you're in. I understand that. You can stop performing the rest of it. Silence. I know you've had someone looking into Harbor Light. I said, you have 45 days from Monday. My attorney will be in touch. I ended the call before she could respond. The next morning, I sat across from Thomas Wren in his New Haven office, afternoon light through old glass. He had every document spread across the table. The Harbor Light engagement agreement, the trust documentation, the corporate incorporation papers. The engagement includes a 45-day termination notice, Thomas said. No penalties, no breach provisions, clean exit at any time for any reason. And the trust? Entirely unreachable from the Hargrove family estate. Elliot was extremely thorough. He anticipated a challenge and structured accordingly. There is no legal avenue available to your father. He paused. Elliot left a note in the file. He said, when this day comes, remind Claire not to be punishing about it, just truthful. He said the truth, delivered without anger, is more permanent than anything else. I thought about that for the drive back to Chicago. That afternoon, I sat with Simone and Adrian in Harbor Light's conference room, the projections on the screen, the renewal offer from Hargrove Associates. Significant numbers. A genuine opportunity. "What do you want to do?" Simone asked. "Draft the termination notice," I said. 45 days per the contract. No grievances, no personal language. Strategic portfolio consolidation. That's the official reason. And personally, I'll write a letter. My father deserves to know the truth. Not the business version, the real version. I sent the termination notice Monday. I spent all of Sunday on the personal letter, 7 drafts. The first was sharp, with 12 years of sharpness, every wound cataloged and named. The third was too cold. The fifth tried too hard to be understood. The final version was quiet, factual, brief. "Dad, the firm your company has depended on for 3 years is mine. I built Harbor Light Studio from nothing, with my own hands and my grandfather's faith, after you told me to leave Cornell and find a husband. The work you have publicly praised was done by your daughter, the daughter you introduced to 300 people as a disappointment. I'm ending the engagement, not out of anger, out of honesty." Grandpa Elliot left me a trust before he died. He had known for years what was done to me and could not undo it, but he made sure I would have what I needed to build something real. Everything I have, I built myself, without your support and without your permission. I don't need an apology. I don't need reconciliation. I just need you to know the truth, because you have been operating on a false version of who I am for 20 years. Don't contact me again. Claire Elliott Hargrove. I added the middle name 3 years ago, the year I moved into the West Loop office with the river views. In honor of the only person in that family who had ever looked at me and seen something worth investing in, I included the Harbor Light Incorporation papers. My name, sole principal, printed clearly. Monday morning, 9:14, courier confirmation. Package signed for by Gerald's executive assistant, a man named Marcus Webb, who I vaguely remembered from a firm holiday party 15 years ago. I sat at my desk, 10:02. Missed call. Gerald Hargrove. 10:11. Missed call. Gerald Hargrove. 10:27. Missed call. Nicholas Hargrove. 10:40. Missed call. Diane Hargrove. 10:53. Text Gerald Hargrove. Call me immediately. It is urgent. 11:08. Text Nicholas Hargrove. What is this? Call now. 11:22. Text Diane Hargrove. Claire, this is not funny. Please pick up the phone. 11:50. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it. By noon, 14 missed calls. 9 texts. The particular quality of waiting that comes from having spent 12 years preparing for a moment and then letting it arrive at its own pace. At 2:15, my assistant knocked. "Miss Hargrove, there are 3 people in the lobby. They say they're family. They say it's urgent. 5-hour drive from Greenwich to Chicago." They had done it the same day. "Conference room B," I said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. I chose conference room B deliberately glass walls. My team could see in. No one could claim afterward that something was said that wasn't. When I entered, they were standing at the window. Gerald, Diane, Nicholas. 3 people looking out at a city they hadn't expected me to have built a life in. My father turned when I came in. "Claire," he said my name like a statement, not a greeting. "Dad, Diane, Nicholas." I sat at the head of the table. They sat. My father placed the letter and the incorporation documents on the table between us. He smoothed the paper with his palm, a gesture I remembered from childhood, the one he used when he was working out what to say next. "This isn't possible," he said. "It is. You left school. You were in Chicago doing—" He stopped. "What?" I said. "Struggling? Freelancing? Something junior." I looked at Nicholas for a half second. "I've been doing this for 11 years. Your firm has been a client for 3. Diane's composure had held through everything until this moment. Now the careful architecture of her expression shifted. "Why didn't you say something?" "If you just told us," she began. "When," I asked, "when you told me I didn't need a degree, When you introduced me to 300 people as your greatest disappointment, when you put me at table 11 near the service kitchen, which part of that suggested this was a safe thing to say to you? She had no answer. Nicholas leaned forward. Claire, I need you to understand what pulling this contract does. The historic designation process on the new portfolio is not something another firm can pick up midstream. The timeline for the acquisition economics he started. I know exactly what it does, I said. I designed the strategy. He stopped. You offered me a junior position at the firm 3 days ago, I said, on the terrace. Something stable and not creative. Do you understand now why that is ironic? His mouth closed. My father's voice when it came was quiet, stripped of the performance that usually lived inside it. What do you want? I want you to know the truth, I said. That's all. I'm not negotiating. I'm not asking for anything this family has. I'm ending the engagement because I should have been honest years ago about who I was, and I wasn't, and some of that is on me. But the reason I hid it is entirely on you. We can make this right. Diane's voice had found a new register, something I almost believed was genuine. Whatever you need from us, whatever would help you feel, there is nothing I need from this family. My father's expression changed, the soft thing disappearing behind the familiar armor, the one I'd watched him reach for my entire life when a conversation wasn't going the way he'd planned. You're threatening to destroy something I spent 40 years building, he said, over a joke. I am terminating a business contract according to its terms, I said. That's not a threat. That's a clause. The letter I sent separately is personal. They are not the same document. I can make things difficult for you, he said. His voice had gone cold. I have lawyers. I have relationships in this industry that, on what grounds? I kept my voice level. Every contract was executed in good faith. Every deliverable was met. There's nothing actionable here, and we both know it. Thomas Wren has already reviewed every possible angle. You may remember Grandpa Elliot used Thomas for his estate planning. Diane's breath caught. Elliot knew about all of this, she said. He set up the trust specifically because he knew what was done to me and couldn't undo it. He made sure you couldn't do it again. My father stared at me. He had no right to. Gerald started. He had every right, I said. It was his money. He made a choice about who deserved it. The same way you made choices about who deserved what in this family, and he disagreed with yours. The silence that followed was the longest of the meeting. My father looked at me for a long time. The way you look at something you thought you understood, discovering you were wrong about its nature entirely. Then he stood, slowly, the way men do when they have run out of moves and need the act of standing to look like a decision. If you walk out of here without resolving this, he said, you're done with this family. No inheritance, no connection. Nothing. I almost felt it. The old pull, the place inside me that had once needed something from him and trained itself not to. Almost, Dad, I said quietly. You ended my access to this family when I was 21 years old, in your study, with Diane sitting beside you already decided. You made that choice. I've been building a life on the other side of it ever since. I don't hate you, I said, and I meant it. This isn't revenge. Hate takes energy I would rather spend on things that matter. I'm setting a boundary. I'm telling the truth. And then I'm going back to work. I held the door open. My father walked past me without speaking. Diane touched my arm as she passed. Nicholas stopped. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't. He left. The glass doors closed behind all three of them. I stood for a moment in the quiet of the lobby. My team, visible through conference room B's glass walls, carefully not watching. Then I went back to my desk and kept working. 6 weeks after that meeting, I received a call from someone who had been a ghost in my life for 10 years. My Uncle Philip, my father's younger brother, an artist. The one who left Greenwich for Santa Fe when I was 14 and was, by the family's accounting, the other one who hadn't turned out right. We'd exchanged a handful of emails over a decade. I'd sent him a card when his daughter was born. He called on a Tuesday evening. His voice was older, a little rough around the edges, like someone who had spent years outdoors. I heard what happened at the gala, he said. Word gets to Santa Fe eventually, and I've been hearing things about Harbor Light. How much do you know? I asked. Enough. A long pause. Claire, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. I was too much of a coward. I've been sitting with it for 12 years, and I'd rather you hear it from me than not hear it at all. When your father told you there was no money for Cornell, Philip said, that was a lie. But it was a specific lie. It wasn't just that there was money available. There was a specific your mother established it before she died, an education fund specifically for you, enough to cover Cornell all 4 years, graduate school, everything she'd wanted you to have. She made your father promise to administer it. My hands went cold. Gerald liquidated the fund when the market dipped, folded the assets into the firm's capital accounts, used part of it for operating expenses and part of it. Later, when Nicholas got into Columbia, Philip's voice cracked slightly. Your mother's money paid for Nicholas's MBA, Claire. That's what happened. Why didn't you tell me? I said. My voice came out strange, very even, very far away, because I was afraid of Gerald. We all were. He had a way of making you feel like the consequence of disagreeing with him would be losing the whole family, not just him. A long exhale. Your grandfather found out a few years after it happened. He confronted Gerald directly. It went nowhere. Elliot couldn't get the money back because it had been in the firm accounts too long and the paper trail was buried. But that's when he set up the trust for you. He wanted to make sure Gerald couldn't take anything else. I thought about Elliot's letter. I know what happened with Cornell. I tried to argue with your father for years. He wouldn't listen. He had known all of it, every piece of it, and he had protected me in the only way he still could. I'm sorry, Philip said. I'm sorry it took me this long. Thank you for telling me, I said. Thank you for not waiting longer. In the months that followed, I didn't track what was happening to Hargrove Associates. I was trying to move on, to put my energy toward the things and people that deserved it. But in Connecticut business circles, news travels without you having to look for it. The Meridian portfolio ran into problems. The historic designation reviews stalled without the expertise and relationships Harbor Light had brought to the process. Delays cascaded. The acquisition economics shifted. Investors asked difficult questions. The board asked harder ones. Nicholas, 4 months into his role as CEO, was already fielding questions about decisions that had been made before he took the chair. My father came out of his transition into retirement to help manage the crisis. The triumphant exit he had planned, the legacy moment, the clean handover of the firm he'd built was unraveling in slow motion. And something else happened. 300 people had been in that room. 300 people had heard my father introduce his daughter as his greatest disappointment. And 300 people, slowly, over weeks and months, began to hear the other part of the story, that the daughter was the architect of the work he'd been taking credit for. That Harbor Light Studios principal was Gerald Hargrove's daughter. I did not tell anyone. I made no statements. I gave no interviews. I didn't need to. In industries built on reputation, truth finds the rooms where it matters. Within 2 quarters, I was told through a mutual contact, someone who ran in those circuits and had known my grandfather, that at industry events, when Gerald Hargrove walked into a room, there was a particular quality of silence. The texture of it had changed. I did not feel triumphant hearing this. I felt tired and something close to sad. Not for them. For all the years that could have been different and weren't. Grandpa Elliot had been right. The truth delivered calmly does more than anger ever could, and it keeps working after you've moved on from it. 8 months after the gala, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ananya Krishnamurthy, Lincoln Square, a small office full of plants and afternoon light, not because I was falling apart, because I was finally ready to stop carrying things alone. In our 3rd session, she asked if I regretted any of it. I thought about it seriously before I answered. No, I said. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret protecting myself. She asked what I was most afraid of. Now, I sat with that for a while. Being seen wrong again, I finally said. Trusting someone with the real version of me and having it used the same way. That was the beginning of a different kind of work, the internal kind, the kind with no deliverables and no billable hours and no public recognition, the kind that matters most. Outside that office, my life kept building. Harborlight was thriving. We replaced the Hargrove contract with two larger, more stable engagements, clients who had found us through the very work that had been making my father look good. Simone was promoted to director of operations. Adrian became a named partner. We hired 6 new staff and moved to a bigger space with a rooftop terrace where I sometimes ate lunch and watched the river and thought about a 300-square-foot room above a print shop in Pilsen and a woman who told me to stop pretending I was there to sort wood panels. I have dinner with Uncle Philip every time he passes through Chicago. He tells me things about my mother that I hadn't known, that she had wanted to be an architect herself, that she'd had real talent and given it up to support my father's ambitions, that she had made him promise before she died that I would not be asked to do the same. He broke that promise before the year was out. I visit my grandfather's grave when I'm in Connecticut. I bring flowers and tell him what's happened, the project awards, the hires, the things that would have made him laugh, the things that would have made him proud. I told him once in October, standing in the quiet of the cemetery with the trees just starting to turn, I didn't let them decide who I was. I almost did, but I didn't. The wind moved through the leaves. I stood there a while. Here's what I know. Your worth is not decided by the family that raised you, not by the degree they let you finish or took from you, not by the table they sat you at, or the name they gave you in a room full of people who laughed along because the person with the microphone invited them to. Your worth is built in the hours when nobody is watching, in the work that doesn't announce itself, in the life you make from whatever remains after they've taken what they wanted and told you what's left isn't enough. My father believed he was doing something light that night at the gala, joking, establishing the familiar order of things, himself at the center, the rest of us arranged around him by rank. He believed he was the one with the microphone. What he actually did was show me I was finally done protecting him from the truth. I spent 11 years building something in silence because silence was the only safe space I had. I don't need that silence anymore, and I don't need that family. Grief and freedom can live in the same body at the same time. That is the thing nobody tells you about walking away from people you once loved. You can be completely certain you made the right decision and still feel the loss of it. Both things are real. Both things are allowed. If you have been the disappointment, the one they pointed to for a laugh, the one whose success they refused to see, or worse, claimed without acknowledgement, the one who has loved people who looked through you like a window to something more interesting on the other side. I see you. You're not what they said. You are never what they said. You are what you build, in the time after, with the materials you have, without anyone's permission. Thank you for being here with me for this. It means more than I have words for. If this story reached something in you, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Share it with someone who needs to know the people who counted them out were wrong. And remember, still waters run deep. What looks still on the surface is never still underneath. Until next time,